now we're going to start our first panel discussion. This one is how AI assistants can really help optimize customer service. So that's going to be the focus of this panel for today. We have Nikki Katz of Bank of America. Thank you for coming, and Scott Zoldi from FICO. So let's start the conversation. Andy, Scott, I want to start with you because you're an analytics software company, so your clients really depend on the technology you provide them to make these big business decisions. So I wonder you could set the table for the audience and tell them about what kind of AI systems we're discussing about, but also about how your customers are using them, if you can give some examples to that.
Yeah, so our company in FICO is an analytics software company. We're responsible for the development of AI machine learning that's used to make decisions. And those decisions could be things like whether or not you get a loan. It could be whether or not you have fraud occurring on a payment account. And we need to make decisions at a transaction level. So we have this deep sort of focus on understanding people deeply from a behavioral perspective, and then operationalizing that, meaning essentially making sure that when a transaction occurs, we can gather that data in one place, we can go get a profile of the past transactions that have occurred, create a score, whether it be whether or not to give a loan, whether or not there's fraud on an account, or whether or not to market to someone, and provide that information at real-time latencies to make a real decision and is personalized to that individual. And that's a big part of our core business, is doing that and doing that at scale. And it has been since we started in the AI machine learning space back in the year 1992.
Excellent. You mentioned at scale, so keep that thought in mind because I'm going to ask you about that in just a second. Nikki, I want to talk to you about Erica, your AI assistant. Full disclosure, I've been a Bank of America customer for more than 30 years. I've used Erica, so I know. But there's a lot of AI assistants out there. Mm-hmm. So if you could explain, you've been using since about 2018, how you decided to go this route, what brought about that reason for it, and how's it going so far?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thank you for your business. When we went down this path, it was definitely thinking about client needs and changing client behaviors. And we were looking at both enabling better interactions, so natural language interactions, and also helping our clients get to what they need faster, more easily, through a personalized experience. And so that was kind of the initial thinking. And we started small. We've since expanded. Since we launched, Erica has served over 42 million clients and who have interacted with Erica over 2.2 billion times. So speaking of scale, we've definitely been able to get a lot of value out of it for the business and for our clients.
Excellent. Now, Andy, you had mentioned scale. So FICO, a number of data science software patents. You yourself, an inventor of many of them. I think your personal patent count is at 140?
Almost 140.
140? Excellent.
Yep.
That is amazing. Now, from that, you've written a number of articles. One I read was very interesting. It talked about generating AI at scale. So what do you feel companies are doing wrong?
So one of the things that we've observed, and I continue to observe this, is that many folks do not understand that when they develop AI machine learning, it has to be intimately sort of married with the software that's going to be deployed in, and that use case has to be understood. So very often AI machine learning is treated as a data science project, right, or a research project, and what you really need to do is say, listen, what is the business problem we're trying to solve? What are the constraints that we need to solve for? If I have to generate an answer in less than 10 milliseconds and I need to do 10,000 of them a second, what is that piece of software that I'm constrained to build the AI and machine learning around? And then what is the most efficient and effective way then to develop that AI so it can be operationalized? Most teams separate data science and AI and software engineering in two different buckets. The two have to be the same bucket, right, with different roles in a project. And when you do that, you have this very consistent view of what that operationalization looks like. And if you have that front of mind, then the two are developing both the software and the machine learning such that it can meet those requirements.
Now, one thing you said when we spoke earlier is that anyone can get access to data to build a model, but the question is, how are they using it? They might be using it wrong, like you said. So what is FICO doing to set that standard?
Yeah, so at FICO, one of the things that we're focused on is making sure that we have an AI development and operationalization standard, right? So that's one thing that many organizations don't have. So if you have 100 data scientists, you have 100 different ways that they want to build a model or operationalize. So for us, there's one standard. Now, moreover, right? That standard is how we respond to regulatory questions about models. That's how we're going to respond to the upcoming AI regulation. That's how we develop our expertise, right? So like I have a lot of data scientists that report to me. They all have different opinions. We'll choose one or two that we will be expert in terms of how we have transparency or explainability. And then ensure that everyone uses those algorithms. And we do that through an AI blockchain. So essentially, we are leveraging blockchain then to enforce that the standard is followed and that every step has been followed in that process, so that when, at the end of that, when the model is released, we can check the blockchain, which is an immutable record of everything that was done in the development, ensure that all the steps are followed, the standard was followed, all the documentation and the regulatory or governance pieces are there. Right? And at that point, we have a level of confidence that we can release those models that meet those standards and requirements safely and effectively.
Excellent. I want to get back to your AI assistant, Erica. Obviously, it was an investment for Bank of America. So what kind of return on investment have you seen? How has it helped the company? Talk about some of the positives of it.
Yeah, and of course this is after 6 years, right?
Yes.
So we've been developing Erica for 6 years. We've tweaked and tuned and optimized it over 50,000 times. And so when you look at the aggregate, a few things. For the clients, 98% of our client inquiries today are resolved within under 44 seconds. So if you think about the alternative of picking up the phone, driving to a Bank of America financial center, that's a pretty big win for our clients. So as far as ROI for the client, there's that piece. For us as a business, Erica our clients have interacted with Erica for over 13 million hours at this point. And now if you think about the cost of that, if it was human hours, that in itself tells a pretty good business story. And then on top of that, when you think about retention, driving engagement, deepening relationships, so adding accounts, helping our clients in their moments of need, and also what has it meant for our ability to really transform where our human time is spent. So our associates now, instead of helping our clients with the most really very basic transactions, they're able to focus their time, which is very valuable to us, on meaningful kind of life conversations. So it's been a really big shift in terms of what goes in digital, what goes to a human channel. And I think the last thing I'd add is that Erica doesn't exist in a vacuum for us. It's part of a continuum where at the very basic end, you've got full self-service. Client just goes in, interacts with mobile or web or whatever. From there, they need a little extra help. Erica's there. If Erica's not able to resolve, we upgrade to a live chat where we have an assistant, but again, it's a pretty efficient channel for us. And when all else fails, we hand over to an agent on the phone. And even there, Erica's able to help by cutting out transfers, cutting out hold time, and getting the client to the exact right person. So really, in terms of ROI for the business and for the client, it's been pretty immeasurable.
I'm wondering if this is where things are headed. Just from a show of hands in the audience, who here has used an AI assistant? I mean, is this where, see, it definitely is. Now, with the challenges with it, I mean, obviously you mentioned you have to keep updating it, updating it all the time. What are some of the other things that you faced when kind of implementing it?
Well, the AI is only as good as the data we train it on, right? And so there was an exciting moment for us. This example I love, back in 2020, COVID hits us, right? And all of a sudden we get all these questions from clients that we're not able to answer about this thing called PPP and Paycheck Protection Program. And so we had 60,000 questions and phrases related to PPP, and we caught it early. We were able to very quickly evolve Erica and again, kind of get back to being able to answer those questions. But you gotta, people think they can just launch and go. And for us, that's the easy part. That's just getting to the starting block, right? From there, it's everything you do. So I think that's one part of it. I think also, and I love, Scott, some of your commentary about having a very specific use case. For us, we started very small. Mm-hmm. And from there, we've expanded so that now what we've done in retail and the consumer side with Erica, well, now we have Cash Pro Chat, which is built on the same foundation to serve our 40,000 commercial and corporate clients, right? Same idea. And we've got a lot of other kind of AI use cases that we've built off that same foundation. So I think that's really where the investment goes, is what do you learn? How do you expand?
And let's talk about, because you hear so much about data, the safety behind it too. Scott, you talked a lot about AI governance and regulations. What do you think is being done right, or what do you think needs to be done more?
So, AI has been around for a long time, and people don't understand that generative AI has been around for a long time, and traditional AI has been around for a very long time, making decisions. And the best way that AI gets used is when it doesn't, cause a challenge for us, right? It's properly governed, it's properly explained. I think one of our challenges today is that we're moving a little too fast. In fact, about 7, 8 years ago, there was a big focus on responsible AI when deep learning occurred, right? Because people got enamored with bigger, larger machines that they couldn't properly explain, they couldn't audit, they didn't understand how it worked, right? And these machines are being applied to lots and lots of use cases. Now, some of these use cases are places where maybe a machine learning model is not appropriate or needs to be very, very heavily governed. And so, one of the areas that I have a strong level of concern about is the fact that we're using machine learning and AI sometimes where we don't understand where it should be used, sometimes where we don't understand the regulation associated with it. And so, I think one of the things that we're focused on today is to say, what are those areas where we should use AI and not use AI, and what types of AI? So, for example, right, like in Europe, we have the European AI Act. It's talking about the concepts of high-risk AI and very high-risk AI. We have examples of companies being sued for their use of generative AI because it's making recommendations that are incorrect, right, which could harm people. And I think we need to put those frameworks around what we do there. Some of that might mean that we go smaller, right, in terms of models that we understand, because it's too critical to make a proper ethical decision, right? And then we have to choose different types of technologies. And I think these are one of the things that we're going to have to look at. And in fact, we're going to be forced to do so because many organizations don't ask these questions early enough. They build the Frankenstein and then they try to put the cage around it, right? Whereas if you start at the very beginning, right, and understand and build up from small, right, and you learn your lessons, right, you'll have the right sort of guardrails in, or you're going to choose an algorithm that you can govern, right, and govern with confidence. And we owe that to the people that we're making decisions with, because one of the worst things about AI, right, is that it can be caustic and callous in the decision making if you don't understand how it's making those decisions. And we, as humans in this room, need to be able to understand how it makes its decisions. If we can't, we really shouldn't be using that technology. And you see with AI regulation, there's a lot of focus there, both on the political front, advocacy fronts, and regulation fronts around this trust in AI challenge today.
Excellent. And Nikki, where else, with all that said, where else is Bank of America using AI, aside from Erica and what we've spoken about so far?
Yeah, I think we're looking at both in client-facing capabilities, associate-facing capabilities, as well as more operational, right? So on the operational side, everything from fraud detection, which Scott obviously spoke about in his context, and but even things like, intelligent receivables. How do we look at receivables and payments? So just really driving cost and creating efficiency in the system. On the associate-facing side, we have a great example of client insights, which is for our Merrill and private bank advisors that are dealing with clients all the time. We've created this AI-based system, which is giving them insights about changes in circumstances for their clients that then lets them know, hey, something's happened, something's changed. Reach out to the client, see whether you can help them, and that could lead to tax harvesting or new opportunities. And so on that front, we've served over 30 million insights to advisors that really just helps them do their job better. So I think, again, from that responsible AI perspective, it allows us to still have a human in the loop, right? Mm-hmm. But then also really make that human way more efficient than they would be otherwise and way more helpful to our clients. So I think those are the three categories we're really looking at as well.
Excellent. Now, since I'm in news, I want to talk about some of the news topics that are going on with AI, some of the trends that you guys see. One of the things that we've heard about lately, actually today we've just heard about too, is the amount of power that people are talking about they're going to need to, with all the data that's out there, with AI. Google just came today talking about nuclear power. You've heard Microsoft, Amazon talk about it. Scott, what's your take on it? Because I remember you saying something interesting, which I haven't heard. Larger isn't always better.
Larger is not always better, yeah. So, I think this is one of the challenges we have, right? And back to the comment about deep learning, right? Our algorithms have gotten more and more complex. And, we need to decide what is the appropriate size of the model or the machine learning model to solve a task. So as an example, right, where we all follow what's happening with these large language models, right? And we It's almost like something we watch on TV. It's exciting to watch all the celebrities in the AI space talk about all this investment and all the challenge. At the end of the day, right, we are solving business problems or affecting human life, and then we have to make decisions around what we want it to do. So, as an example, right, you can solve the same problems as a large language model with a much smaller version. Like what I build at FICO is things called focused language models that are very focused on a problem domain, like a financial services domain, and then a very specific sort of task. These models are quicker to train, use less energy, and each inference is going to be much, much more cost effective, maybe not even involving proper GPUs, right? And so we need to kind of train ourselves with the fact that bigger isn't better, because very often it contains much more hallucinations, much more noise, right? And then we have this sort of energy component. Right? It's been said by better people than myself that talk about that, more parameters basically talks to the meritocracy with respect to our understanding of what this AI machine learning does. So, one of my big sort of themes that I talk about is essentially that we need to focus on deep understanding of these models, and they don't need to be as large as they are today. And it's the wrong direction, right? And in fact, a lot of the companies that are focused on these large language models are focused on sort of research metrics, not business metrics. It's a very different way that we solve problems today, and we have to just keep that in focus today.
And on the banking side, something we've heard as of late is the number of banking locations closing, more people going to digital, so banks are kind of shutting down doors from different locations. Do you find that at Bank of America, or where do you see that future headed?
Yeah, I think we're always evaluating the nature of what client needs are, right, and modifying our financial centers and the role that they play based on those needs. For us, that has not meant going away from financial centers. In fact, we just announced that we're adding 165 across the country in the next couple of years. We just finished renovating 3,000. We're obviously in it, for the long term. I think, again, it's more about what is the nature of the interactions, what is the time spent in the financial centers. So when the clients come in, it's more of a meeting space in a way. It's for them to have deeper conversations with associates, whether that's about life events or more complex problems that we really want the associates to guide them through. So it's just changed more the nature of the interactions rather than done away with the model. And in fact, we've been on a high-tech, high-touch kind of model for a long time. And again, I talked about the continuum. That's almost at the other end of the continuum, and it's part of it.
Yeah, and that's what we've seen sometimes. A lot of time, the banks turning into these places where people can learn more, whether it's small business owners or people in different communities. So I think I understand what you're talking about. So Scott, where else do you see the technology headed? I mean, what are you excited about, or even on the opposite side, what concerns you? Because you spoke a little bit about that too. Yeah.
I mean, one of the things that excites me really is the fact that we are talking about, agent-based AI. I think this is actually a good conversation topic. Now, a lot of people view it as negative, right? If you look at the evolution of agent AI, because essentially you end up giving up your control of what that agent does, depending on which level of maturity you have. At the same time, right, the types of problems that we're going to try to solve with AI are very, very complicated, right? And one of the things I think that is, one of the true facts about AI is that we need them to be very task-focused. So, I think one of the things I'm excited about is the fact that we are exploring more of this agent-based AI in terms of different functions that it can take on, because I think we're going to have many of these agents working together, right, to make good decisions. And each of those agent AIs could be very complicated models to make them very, very good at their tasks, right? But as we build that up and we have the ability to make those decisions, we're going to start to see AIs being assembled that can really solve really meaningful questions and meaningful business problems. I also think one of the things I'm excited about is the use of blockchain and other technologies to govern these AI models, right? So, should someone make a decision or not? What are the controls we're going to put in place around these agents? So I see that as one of the more positive things that are occurring from an innovation perspective. And then I think the discussion of AI regulation and what does that mean is really important also, because it's starting to get us away from the sort of Kaggle contest and the large language models and get us into the practicality of making business decisions with models and with AI appropriately. And I think if we can mirror those two things, right, there's this false sort of view that regulation is anti-innovation. That's not the case. Regulation puts on the guardrails to do innovation responsibly, right? And I think that we're all moving in that direction today, and we'll just have to keep moving that direction.
Excellent. Nikki, the last few minutes that we have here, where do you see the technology headed where do you see the trends headed, and how does that technology kind of need to advance in order to meet those trends?
Yeah, I think in our space, client expectations continue to evolve, right? We used to talk about personalization. I think that's taken on a new meaning. And so, I would love to get to a world where we're personalized to the extent that when I, walk by Starbucks, I know whether that's a good decision to make and what that latte is going to cost me long term, right? How that plays into my life goals and what I'm trying to achieve financially. I think for us, Erica specifically has always played a dual role. It's been both almost mission control to help guide my financial future in that way, as well as a concierge, just help me get stuff done really quickly. And I think to the point that Scott made around having a very specific goal of what you're trying to achieve, I think both of those we can make a ton of progress on. So making our clients way more efficient, and then making it a lot easier for them to think about the long term and also just to know where to be efficient.
That's true. Thank you very much. This was a great. Hang tight with us right now. We're going to move on to our IBM sponsor spotlight right now. We're going to look into the rules of AI ROI. Please welcome to the stage Panos Panay with the Recording Academy, and he's going to have a conversation with Edward Adams from Bloomberg.